Hello, 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 and welcome everybody to another amazing Fireside Chat with Trey Athletes. I'm the program director, and I thank all of you for joining us tonight. You are in for a treat because tonight we are talking all things balance. We're talking about balancing school and sport. And to join us, we have Blake Jolivette and Jordan Borucki, moderated by my dear friend and colleague, Brian Reynolds. Following this conversation, there will be a Q&A discussion. So we urge all of our audience participants to make sure you submit questions using the Q&A function. If you submit a question, you will have the opportunity to join us on screen and ask your question live. If you would like to, no pressure. For all of our season 3 participants, don't forget that your team can win a pizza party by engaging with us on social media. Make sure you tag us at Trey Athletes and check us out on Instagram for more details on how your team could win. Tonight's chat is presented by Trey Athletes. We are a Dallas-based youth sports nonprofit, and our mission is to empower athletes to be leaders, role models, and influential voices for their communities. We believe that by providing high school athletes with the opportunity to learn and engage with amazing speakers like we have tonight, they will be provided with necessary insights that can help ensure they are successful on and off the court and field. I'll be back at the end of the conversation to share a few updates and reminders. I hope you all enjoyed this amazing conversation. And with that, Brian, it's all on you.
Thank you so much, LaJoy, and welcome, 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 everyone. I'm Brian Reynolds, co-founder and co-CEO of Trey Athletes. Tonight, for our conversation regarding balancing school and sport, we have double the trouble and double the fun. We all know that feeling when you meet someone and you just immediately click. It's almost like you like all of the same things, you match each other's energy, but over time, you also push each other to become the best version of yourself. It's a true friendship. And thanks to his wonderful wife, Alicia, who I actually met first, that's exactly the type of friendship I'm lucky to have with our first speaker tonight, Blake Jolivette. Blake grew up in Houston, Texas, and played Division I college basketball at American University in Washington, D.C. He currently serves as the North Texas General Manager for Otis Elevator Company, the largest and oldest elevator company in the world. Across southern Oklahoma and northern Texas, Blake is responsible for a total business valued at more than $60 million. And he directly oversees all aspects of his offices, from sales and operations to finances and customer satisfaction. Blake's direct reports total over 100 employees. And prior to his current role in Dallas, Blake held positions in a number of Otis's other locations, including North and South Carolina, Virginia, Connecticut, California, Arizona, and South Texas. In college, Blake earned his bachelor's degree in business administration and finance. And he currently lives in the Plano area with his wife, Alicia, 6-month-old daughter, Briar Rose, and their 2 pets. In his free time, Blake enjoys playing golf, working out, cooking, reading, volunteering with Trey Athletes, and spending time with his beautiful family. Welcome, Blake.
Thank you, Brian. Excited to be here.
Through Blake, we've been fortunate to get to know his college teammate and our second speaker for tonight, Jordan Borucki. Prior to playing Division I college basketball at American University, JB is originally from LA. He currently works as the founder and CEO of Legacy Enterprise Management. LEM is a consulting firm and business incubator for professional athletes, brands, and tech companies. JB specializes in business development, branding, and strategic investments. And he's worked with Shaq, Trey Young, Mark Cuban, CJ McCollum, Chris Paul, Dwayne Wade, and a number of other incredible athletes, entertainers, and brands. Previously, Jordan spent 4 years working in the NBA on the business side with the San Antonio Spurs and the LA Clippers. And in college, JB earned his bachelor's degree in entrepreneurship and marketing and his master's degree in strategic communications. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce everyone tonight to Jordan Borucki.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Brian.
For tonight's Fireside Chat, we'll be discussing balancing school and sport. More specifically, we want to discuss the challenges that young athletes face to manage so many competing priorities. And we'll hear stories and tips from our speakers, both of whom are young guys in their 20s who successfully balanced both basketball and school in high school and college, and who have gone on to successful business careers. To kick things off tonight, Blake and Jordan, Take us back to Houston and LA. And speaking of school and sport, a quick note for folks at home. Ironically, the Houston Rockets are playing the LA Lakers tonight, where the Lakers will be hanging their 17th World Championship banner. Shout out to the legend and I Promise School founder, LeBron James. Blake, if you could start us off and then pass to Jordan, tell us about your high school and college careers, both on and off the court. What were you like as a player, and what were you interested in beyond basketball?
Sure, Brian. So as a young kid, I grew up relatively privileged. We moved around from New Orleans to Northern Virginia and did the bulk of my growing up in Houston, as you said before. So I really didn't want for much. I had every new game system. I had all the premium package cable, cartoon channels. Everything I wanted, I got. And, we were very blessed and fortunate to be in the position we were in. So with that being said, I was always involved in a lot of different sports and activities, but I never really had anything pushing me to ascend to the next level of greatness, so to speak, whether it be academically, athletically, or what have you. But as soon as I graduated and went from 8th grade to 9th grade, I was the best kid in all our private league school teams. And then I started playing with the inner city kids on the Nike circuit and quickly got comfortable and find a nice spot at the end of the bench. And as a freshman kid who was used to starting and playing a lot and kind of being the big man on campus, so to speak, playing for my own dad, getting relegated to the bench for about 2 years when we were traveling to Vegas, New York, Atlanta, all these good spaces. Seeing kids getting offers and recruited, really lit a fire into me as well. So because of how I was raised, I always knew that basketball would be a tool to get me where I needed to be and where I wanted to be. So the academic piece was something that by default, I really applied myself to. So right around 10th grade, when I started growing, started developing, I realized that I can actually be really good at this. And I found a couple of good opportunities within the program, really started challenging myself, transferred to a good competitive high school program. And kind of from then, I went from no offers to probably around 21, 22 offers in the span of like 2 weekends. And for me, that's kind of when everything started to coalesce. And I was extremely focused on academics and athletics, and something that I found later on in life, once I met JB, actually, and we were teammates and roommates in college, I realized that it was okay to have fun and have a good work-life balance, because up until that point, it was basketball, it was school, and that was it to get where I wanted to be. So in going to college, I kind of kept up those healthy habits, started doing my internships and my externships, and also applying myself in the classroom and on the court as well. And it worked out really well. So.
That's awesome, Blake. I think it's really incredible to see not only how you evolved at such a young age from really kind of being the star to learning how to play your role when and where you needed to, and then kind of playing multiple roles when you were in college, which we can chat about here a little later. But we've got another incredible speaker here tonight. Jordan, talk to us about what it was like for you growing up in LA. What were you like both on and off the court, and what were some of the things that really drove you?
I appreciate it. And Blake, congrats on telling that story, but tell the real story next time. No, I'm just messing with you. No, I was really fortunate to have an amazing mom and sister who raised me. My dad was never involved in my childhood growing up. And so, it was tough. We didn't have it maybe as privileged as Blake had mentioned. We were just in this position where we had to make it and survive. So growing up, I actually worked a lot. I worked at a pizza place. I sold stuff on the beach. I sold candy to kids at school just to try to make it. And then once I got into high school, I got really fortunate because I just had a strong passion and desire to know that if I use basketball as a tool, to Blake's point, and look at it from a perspective that could take me to places that I couldn't even have dreamt of, and so I always had an admiration of being in the NBA. Some of my childhood idols were Allen Iverson, Kobe Bryant, people like that. And so it was one of those things where I heard about their stories. I heard about their successes and the path that they took, and that motivated me. I had really good mentors, I would say, people from basketball coaches, the people at the church, to just kind of older men. I even had a big brother growing up through like the big brother, big sister program that really helped developed me into who I am today. I think, I grew up in a neighborhood with just Black and Mexican people. So I think when I got to college, it was pretty eye-opening and awakening in the respect that like there was a lot of people that had a lot of money and they just dealt with things a lot differently. So that transition was a little bit challenging for me, just coming from the background that I came from, just adjusting to different economic classes and, just how to handle yourself, how to carry yourself, how to be articulate, how to do these things at a high level. And I was really blessed, like I said, to have a mother that supported me through all this. And, I really had just the right people that she placed around me. And I was really fortunate to have good coaches that mentored me and that really instilled just how you use basketball and not let basketball use you. And I think the earlier I learned that, the easier it was for me when I went through some difficult times or some hard times or when things weren't going well on the court. And so that's really where I looked at it as a tool and a gateway to help me and my family. And that was really the kind of sense of urgency that I needed in order to make it. It was like, if I use this, this would be the way for me and my family to have success and not have to struggle and worry about different things. So I'm really fortunate.
Jordan, one of the things that I absolutely love that you highlighted that Blake touched on a little bit too is this idea of using the game as opposed to letting the game use you. And I think that starting off with you, JB, for this next question, talk to us a little bit about your college recruiting process. And if you could, please help our athletes by focusing primarily on some of your priorities off the court too. So I guess the question really is, what were the most important factors to you when you were considering different schools? And especially, you talked about a number of the mentors who are in your life and how close you are to your mom and your sister. The support network that you surrounded yourself with in order to help you pick, inevitably, American University.
Sure. Yeah. The college process was a little bit different. I got recruited a little bit later. A range of schools from Division III to Division I. I wanted to go to a good academic school. That was like my number one goal. So I set goals basically when I figured out, all right, where do I want to go to school? And the things that were important to me were get a great education. Like that was like number one. So I was getting recruited by all the Ivy League schools because I figured if basketball doesn't work, at least I can go to a place where I can really be relying on my education. And I was always thinking futuristic, right? So it's like, for whatever reason, I don't play, I don't become a pro, I get hurt. And ironically, some of those things did happen. And I was fortunate to go to American, but I didn't choose American until about 2 weeks before school started. I committed to Cornell originally, Ivy League school. And then towards the end of my recruitment and commitment process, things just didn't work out. The coach and I didn't really align and see eye to eye. And then so I decommitted and kind of opened it back up. Ended up going to a prep school for a year in Connecticut, which was great. Really helped me develop, really helped me learn what it was like to live away from home. I went from LA to Connecticut, and it gave me an opportunity to be on the East Coast. It gave me an opportunity to kind of see what that would be like living away and challenging myself for an additional year. And then in terms of kind of locking into some of the different people and some of the stuff off the court, it really was just perspective of people that weren't involved in sport, people that necessarily didn't say, oh, well, I was a college player or a pro or a coach or whoever it may be. It was some of the people that just had regular jobs, regular in respect to not being in the professional realms or not having a sport background. And that really gave me context to being like, oh, you're a firefighter, you're a banker, you're a, writer, or you're a personality, or you are a, actor. And those things kind of gave me a less of a tunnel vision when it comes to sports. And I think it's really easy to get caught into that because it's like, oh, I just play ball and that's what I do. And it defines you, but I think the more you can kind of surround yourself around people that aren't always in that, it gives you worldly perspective. In college, outside of Blake, I had roommates that were on the soccer team. I had roommates that were not involved in sport at all. I had roommates that were living in other countries. And that really gave me perspective on just life in general and how big the world is and how everything happens for a reason in respect to like with that, I still talk to some of the people that I was roommates with. I still have great perspective and conversations, because you're always going to have the locker room. You're always going to have your teammates. You're going to have the travel, the road, and all that stuff is amazing. But I think it's definitely good to kind of give you other perspectives, because it keeps you grounded, and it also doesn't let you burn out. Like, I remember listening to, ironically, JJ Redick, who's on the Dallas Mavericks. He said basketball stopped becoming fun for him until he started finding hobbies like wine and watches and reading and real estate. And once he started to be able to take his mind to another place, because basketball can get frustrating, and Blake can kind of attest to that in some of our college experiences. Like, there was times we didn't play. There was times where, we were getting cussed out by our coaches, or we were losing, or we were conditioning and we weren't making the drills, or, we just were frustrated with the process, and we didn't have an outlet. We didn't have another thing to go to at times. And then once we started to develop, as Blake said, getting an internship, having mentors, going to church, going to, other people that are successful within other realms, you start to take a step back and say, well, basketball is how I got here. And it is the tool that is my most successful asset to put me to the next step. You also need to have other people to help ground you and give you real life and worldly perspective, so that when you do go back to basketball, you're that much more motivated and you don't feel burnt out.
So much of what you just said is just pure gold. I think that to kind of like pull a little bit of that together, one of the things that really jumps out at me is this idea of creating balance in life by creating balance among the people who you surround yourself with. So kicking it over to Blake now. Blake, would love to hear your thoughts on, the decision factors for you, the criteria that you looked at when considering different schools and different programs. And again, especially as it relates to off the court for all of our Trey athletes watching and listening at home.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it really goes back to what JB said. He hit the nail on the head. For me, I've moved, 12 or 13 times in the past 7 or 8 years since college. And, for me, growing up, always being at home with my family, number one, and still to this day, I'm always looking for the next challenge, and it's all about growth. And secondly, I had to think about it and take a step back and think worst case scenario and think, if I go into this school and I tear my knee up on day one and I can never play ball again, can I see myself staying, finishing out 4 years and being able to have the opportunity to land a solid career and learn and grow and meet a bunch of people? And for me, it was all about getting out of my comfort zone, but also making an informed decision. I didn't want to go somewhere and just sit on the bench, right? I didn't want to go to a school that was really hot and sexy because of the name, which I had a few opportunities to do, but I also didn't want to take a back seat or go too high or too low, right? So for me, it was finding that happy medium and going to a place, an environment where I can make an impact immediately athletically, but also have the opportunity to grow and kind of hone, who I was as a person, right? And JB said it earlier, that meant inserting myself into a situation or immersing myself into different cultures and just having exposure to parts of the world and people that I had never known or ever had the opportunity to explore. And I think, for me, taking a step back, talking with my family, praying about it, looking at my list, going to American, having the opportunity athletically to come in and make an immediate impact long-term, and academically being somewhere that was, right on par, right below the Ivy League schools, because my initial offers came from Harvard, Yale, and Dartmouth. And I did, the first 3 of my official visits there. And my last visit was actually at American, and American gave me the opportunity to kind of skirt the line between both sides. And also being in DC, one of the most international cities, not only in the country, but in the world, was great. And it really worked out well. And I think, I ended up meeting this knucklehead here, and I wanted to clarify something. You said we were both in our 20s, but JB cracked the 30 burger mark, I believe, a couple of years ago, right? And he just had his birthday. So happy belated birthday to you. Now that you're in your early 30s, the dirty 30s. So just wanted to get the truth out there for everybody. But
like I was trying to, again, you talked about kind of skirting that line between school and sport. I was trying to skirt that line as the moderator over here, so appreciate that. And I think just to stick with you for a second, Blake, before we head back over to Jordan to hear his thoughts, talk to us about how, okay, so now you've picked your college and you're transitioning from high school to college. For a lot of people, that can be incredibly scary. What were your biggest adjustments, and what advice do you have for our athletes at home who are going to be making that transition, whether it's as athletes or more generally as just students?
The biggest adjustment for me was being on my own, and as a Division I athlete, student athlete, your schedule, your time, your life is completely different than every other person you come into contact with, even other athletes. And at AU, we didn't have a football program, so we were the top program at school. And, going from high school to college, within a week, and learning how to address your schedule, to get up on time because your mom's not screaming at you anymore, to wake up at 6 a.m. and clean and cook and do all that stuff. So making sure that you learn how to adhere to a schedule, fulfill your obligations. You have your practice and your workouts, but you have to do so much outside of that athletically, whether it's hitting the weight room and making sure that you're getting your cardio in and doing all the extra stuff and go above and beyond, and being able to kind of accept that as reality. And JB can tell you, we had a couple of folks that were on our team as freshmen, and they tried to be like the average school kid who was able to go out all night and party and show up to class late and do all that while being a Division I athlete, and it just didn't work, and they didn't adjust well, and they left the program after the first few months. And that was something that took me a while to get into a rhythm. And once you get those priorities set and understand, what you stand for, and what you want long-term after the sport, that kind of kept me grounded and helped me going when the athletic piece wasn't always there.
And I think, Blake, it probably helped prepare you for a lot of the things that you're dealing with right now in your day-to-day life, whether it's the new job, whether it's, we heard, your adorable new baby in the background. Being able to balance those competing priorities is a lot to handle. And I think, Jordan, hearing from you too on this is really important, because you talked about not only first transitioning from West Coast to East Coast, from totally different types of schools as it related to your schools in LA versus this prep school on the East Coast, and then heading out to DC to team up and share a room with this guy. Talk to us about what that transition was like for you, and what tips or advice you might have for athletes and students who are getting ready to go through that process.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It was a challenging transition, as I mentioned earlier. I think just culturally, I think there was a lot of things I just didn't understand. I think there was a lot of things I was probably a lot ignorant to, and maybe not as open-minded as I probably should have been. And I think there was a lot of things I carried with me because I held kind of a lot of ego and pride to that. I remember being like, oh, this is the way they're acting, and that's not me, or that's not how I grew up. Like, I went to a public school and we didn't have this, and that, and we didn't have it as good, and expectations, or there's certain arrogance, or there's just certain things that we're seeing right now, right, within race that I experienced that were challenging, and being discriminated against for the color of my skin. And I think there's a lot of things I had to accept, as well as adjust and adapt and realize that life, number one, is never going to be fair. And that's something that the earlier you're able to understand and accept, and also just try to make better. That's one thing I think I realized and learned is throughout my time, I've always tried to leave things in a better place than where I found them. So even though I didn't necessarily understand the transitions, I hope that when I left, I at least left a better person, and also left a really good impression on the place that I just left. So it's not about how you start, right? It's about how you finish. And I think I had to learn that pretty quickly, because school was pretty challenging, because I think the academic rigor is just so different when you go from high school, especially a public high school, to college. Expectations, grades, when things are due, just all the logistics. I mean, as Blake said, it was right below an Ivy League school, and we went to a business school that was one of the top business schools in the country. So I think there's definitely a huge adjustment to just learning how to study, like understanding how much time you need for that, the balance between being an athlete and a student. I think people probably underestimate when you're in high school, because you can kind of get by with certain things. Things aren't as hard. The expectations aren't as hard. Like the actual amount of time you have to study as an athlete, you're waking up typically really early in the morning. You usually have some sort of weights or practice, and then you have class all day. And then you have obviously a little bit of a break for lunch. And then typically you have stuff in the afternoon, whether it's weights or practice again. And then after that, you have study hall. So imagine that whole day of just like 6, 7 in the morning, all the way to what time do we get out of study hall, Blake? Like sometimes 9, 10 at night. Like those people were some of our best friends, like.
Yeah. But even then though, JB, you remember when you're in league play, or we're driving to New York and playing Columbia, and then we're driving back after the game at 11 o'clock at night, and we have a 7-8 hour bus ride, and you have a finance final at 8 a.m., and you lose the game and your coach is pissed and all the lights are off and you don't feel like doing anything, but you got to hunker down, open the books, use your little phone light and study, and then 2 hours of sleep, and you go in and, you let them fly. We did that all the time.
Yeah, and our coaches would literally be there at 8 a.m., like at our class, like making sure we were there, just because they knew, like, it's like, there's no shortcuts. Like and that's what I meant by not being fair. It's like, well, a normal college student could probably just go to bed and feel good, watch the Netflix and, have a night. You're coming back from a hard practice, or to your Blake's point, on a bus ride at 3 a.m. and it's tough. It's tough because physically it drains you. It's really exhausting. And regardless of how in shape you are or how often you do it, there's a season, there's expectations, there's, things you have to do in the community. There's things you have to do for boosters. There's things you have to do just in ways you're not used to as a high school student, where it's like, oh, this game's only 20 minutes away from us, or, the rival team's over here. And it's like, you're getting on planes and you got connections and sitting in terminals, and sometimes your plane gets delayed or canceled and you still got to get up and do the same thing. Or you're in the middle of a snowstorm. Like our freshman year, we had this snowstorm in DC that was about, like, it felt like it was like a year long, but it was about a week and a half, and the whole city was shut down, and they still made us go to class, and we had to walk through the snow about a mile to practice, and nothing was shut down. Even our games were still on. It was just crazy. So I would just say the weather and everything. But yeah, I would say the biggest adaptation is just really understanding how mentally tough you have to be. You have to be very disciplined, and you have to make sure that you challenge yourself constantly. And that while, yes, you may move forward kind of one level of toughness, like there's always another level. And coaches really pride themselves on that, being mentally tough. And, I think Blake and I can attest, like even our physical condition, there was a conditioning drill called the ladder that Blake and I still have nightmares about. But, you run up and down the court.
Already just thinking about it, I'm getting nervous.
Yeah, you run up and down the court, everything's timed. And we had a really hard time making it our freshman year. So that whole summer, the next summer, me and Blake went to Houston, and we literally just ran the ladder for weeks and just mentally started to prepare ourselves to like being in physically great shape, mentally, like understanding how to push yourself towards boundaries. But you're going from, you're separating yourself from the men amongst boys. So I would just say that was a big thing physically and mentally that was a big adaptation that I think hopefully you guys can start to get your mind right when you think about, obviously rest in peace to Kobe, but Mamba mentality and, some of the mind games that, LeBron talks about, or some of the different people that have had these different competitive advantages. A lot of it is up here, a lot of it is just between your eyes and your ears and really the people you surround yourself with. So if those people are going to push you and challenge you, like you want to make sure you're around them. The people that are going to keep you complacent and like, oh, let's just go chill, or let's do this, or let's do that. You want to try to separate yourself from them because you never want to get comfortable. So.
Yeah. And to get back on that mental strength piece, and it's something just everybody on the call, and I know we know it as athletes, but you'll use the experiences that you develop and you go through as a collegiate athlete and a high school athlete for the rest of your life. And the mental strength aspect of it is something that I always find myself constantly thinking back on the ladders that we had to run, or, waking up at 2 a.m. to get, another hour of studying in because we got in late, one night and have a final the next morning, or whatever it is. And it's like just today, I mean, you can see my work phone. I've got 215 unread emails from today that I haven't gotten into. I haven't seen my wife or my baby yet, and gonna hang with them after this. Then I'm going to start cranking out emails and working on tomorrow. And it's just like JB said, as a collegiate athlete, it's the same thing. You have class, you have practice, you have your social life, you have obligations, you have press, you got to do all that. And then you got to get the academic piece done. You got to graduate and you got to perform. And as you grow older and you experience more life, it's the same exact thing. And the mental piece and the advantage that we as student athletes have over, the quote unquote competition, is that we have those experiences and you have that grit. But I think about those times, every single day in my job, and it's really what helps me, get through the tough days. Right. So I think JB raised valid points for sure.
I love so much of what you guys just said. And I think that like this idea of coming prepared, coming ready, and really putting yourself in a position to be successful by prioritizing the things that are most important to you in a really limited amount of time can be really challenging and tough for anyone, but especially a young adult. So I think so many of the things that you guys just described really jump off the page. And you already answered one of my other questions, which was, talking about a typical day in your schedule as a college athlete. So just a couple notes here for our audience real quick who's watching live. I have another question or two that we're going to try to fit in here in the next, call it 7 to 8 minutes. And after that, we're going to be taking questions from our audience. So make sure you include those in the chat. So the question for you, Jordan, we'll start with you, is, now you're on campus, now you've successfully transitioned, you've surrounded yourself with an incredible support system, and you're kind of adapting to college life. And you chose entrepreneurship and marketing for your undergraduate studies, followed by strategic communications for your master's degree. How did you pick your major? And in your case, how did you choose to pursue your master's degree?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. As I said, I think business was something I always loved, growing up as a kid, and, watched a lot of Shark Tank, watched a lot of, just things that really helped start to challenge my mind. I think I looked at entrepreneurship and seeing like these different moguls and like how people were building businesses is really exciting. And I don't think I ever looked at things traditionally, like, oh, well, you go to a job and you start a job and you work here for this many years and you do that. Like I thought of myself as somebody that knew people, knew how to connect dots, was willing to be a risk taker. And so I think that's why I chose what I chose. I felt that, working at a couple jobs growing up as a kid, like I said, whether it was selling pizzas or, tie-dye shirts on the beach or candy at school, like I think it was more the hustle and the mentality of just being like, hey, like I don't need something to do something. And that was kind of like my mentality of being like, well, let me learn the real proper business way of how to set up entrepreneurship. So I think that was that. And then marketing, I think I love storytelling. I love the idea of like being able to influence someone, understanding how to kind of get deeper behind the mind of consumer behavior, of what goes behind decision making, what goes behind why people are influenced to do certain things. So everything from kind of the rise of social media, which kind of happened during Blake and I's like late high school, early college careers. So that was really fun. And then strategic communication was interesting. So I had a few internships in college. I worked at a sports agency, and I got to do some really cool things there. And I got to work with some of the top athletes in the world. And it was that point I said, you know what, I need to learn how to be a great communicator. I need to be able to negotiate. I need to be able to understand what forms of communication and how to communicate with who and what people. And so that was kind of an opportunity. It was a top 5 strategic communications program. And I ended up getting hurt my senior year at American. And so I needed to figure out if I wanted to stay there. And so I decided to stay there and that was kind of the opportunity that I chose, was to get a secondary degree in something that was similar to business, but a little bit different. And it challenged me to kind of learn how communication works, both publicly, internally, strategically, how you talk to a business. I ended up writing my thesis on the NBA, which is one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was like a 78-page thesis paper, which was really tough, but was really grateful that I did that, just because it started to open up a ton of doors professionally. And it just gave me the confidence that, hey, like, I can challenge myself and do something that isn't necessarily the easiest thing, but it allowed me to kind of learn and have perspective on what another, major would look like. And so that was part of the main reason. I don't know if there's a second question attached to that, Brian, but.
No, that was great. I knew I liked you already, but I'm finance and comms for my undergrad too. So I feel like we're just kind of cut from the same cloth over here. I am loving this.
Of course.
Of
course.
Hey, what he didn't mention was that me and JB had the same injury on the same knee, and we're in rehab at the same time, which was pretty wild. So we were able to kind of lean on each other on that, but we've got fond and not so fond memories of the dark days that were rehab. But yeah, it was pretty crazy how that worked out.
Blake, in addition to maybe shedding a little light there as it relates to overcoming adversity through, your injuries, and actually, you know what, let's press pause on that injury. So we'll set that aside here for just a second. Would love to hear your thoughts on how you chose business and finance, because you know me, I'm a finance guy. So I feel like I got the best of both worlds here with BJ and JB. Talk to me a little bit about how you picked business and finance as your area of focus for your major.
So I was very different from JB, and I think that's why we were so good from each other, because we both brought polar opposite life experiences and ideologies together, and we were able to kind of snowbird and pick and choose from each other what worked, what didn't work, what we liked about each other, what we didn't like, and how we applied it to our own life. And I knew right away JB was a risk taker, and I was very safe. I was very conservative. And, I knew I loved people and I loved money, and I didn't know how they were going to coalesce at some point, but I learned early on that if I followed my heart and I followed my passions, the money and everything, the success would come. So for me, I also wanted something that made sense, that was applicable. If, everything went to hell with my collegiate career and academics, I wanted to have a piece of paper that could guarantee me something, right? And for me, that was business and it was finance. And, through, sheer luck or fortune or whatever you want to call it, I was one of the only guys early on that, as a freshman, I was immediately focused on getting an internship, getting a job. JB can tell you they made fun of me all the time. I'd show up to practice late in suits, and, I went and I had a little scholarship money left over, and I got a photo shoot at JCPenney in like my suit. I got a $400 check and I bought a suit, and I posted it on Facebook and put it on my LinkedIn. And, I was always really focused on that piece. And I never would have gone out. There was an ad in the school paper, and it was for a mock interview. And I had never had a job interview before. I didn't know anything about professional presence. And because I had known JB, like, well, I may as well just take a risk and just do it and see what happens. And I ended up getting a full-time paid internship as a 17-year-old kid. And they didn't hire unless you were a junior or senior. And because of that singular instance and opportunity opened up every single door for me. I still talk to the people that hired me now. They're a pair of my best mentors. So I think it was following my passions, knowing what drove me and what made me tick, not thinking about the end result, and not being afraid to jump at every opportunity that came that made sense, and focusing on busting my tail every single day, athletically and academically. And you look up one day and you have, what you're looking at now, right? So that's kind of how I played that piece.
That's awesome. That JCPenney photo shoot sounds epic, and we're going to need to see some headshots at some point in time, Blake. So now we're going to turn to some questions from the audience. We have our first question here from Tamori and Graceby, who wants to ask JB, and I would love to hear Blake's response to this too. During your freshman year in college, did you ever have a time where you doubted yourself, but you overcame it?
Hey,
I'll let Blake tell the story because
you already know what I think.
He's actually going to exaggerate it times 1,000. But yes, to answer your question, there were a few times, and I think for both of us, which was really unique, we went through it together. There was times we went through them separately throughout college, but I think that's actually what kind of brought us really close as what I consider Blake as like a brother, and I'll let him tell the story of kind of how it all came to a point where we felt really low and vulnerable, and there was a lot of doubt, and there was like a place where we just didn't even want to be at college anymore. We didn't want to play basketball. There was like a lot of depression, which now there's a lot of talk around mental health, but I think during that time we didn't really know what that was. We just knew that it didn't feel right, and that we didn't have really anyone other than ourselves to kind of go through it together with. So
yeah, so to kind of expound upon how we arrived there, I came in as I had a lot of hype around me. I played in the Capital Classic as a senior in high school. They flew me out to DC. We played at American. I'm doing interviews, signing autographs. Like, I was like 17. I was like, man, this is amazing. I come from a small private school in downtown Houston to that. I came in, I was a starter, and then we played against CJ McCollum on national television in our first Patriot League game as freshmen. My coach threw my shooting shirt in my face because CJ scored like 12 straight points on me or something to open the game. And he put me at the end of the bench. And I went and sat down next to JB, and he was like, welcome. We've been saving this for you. And JB on his side of it was killing the dudes that were playing in front of him in practice, but he just wouldn't get opportunities. And he would share his frustrations with me. And then overnight, I got punched in the mouth, and I was no longer the man. I was no longer starting, not even in the rotation. And for us, it was really a shock to our senses because we knew we had more to offer. Couple that with being, two black kids, really the only two black kids on the team at that time, in DC, miles away from home. My coach straight up told me that I can go to another program. I was never going to play there again. It's a lot for a couple of freshman kids to take. And I remember one night, we were living in the dorms, and I got a call from him at like 11 o'clock at night. And he said, hey man, I really just, I just need a brother. I just need somebody to talk to. And I'm like, okay. So I go and I'm looking for him. I'm in his dorm, and he's not in his room. He's not in the common room. And I call him like, where are you at? And he's like, I'm in the washroom. I'm like, the washroom, okay. So we go down in the basement, and the washroom is like the laundromat where they have all the washer and dryers and whatnot. And I see him just sitting on top of the dryer, and his head is in his hands. And I go in and I sit next to him on the other washer, and we just start crying together, and we start talking and sharing our frustrations. And it was something that I'll never forget. And we laugh about it now, but in that moment, it was me and it was him, and all of our problems stemming from our identity being linked to our sport. And I remember we called my dad on the phone, and my dad basically said, all right, both of y'all need to like chill out. You're in DC, you're getting school paid for, you're playing Division I basketball, relax. But this is why you need to find something outside of your sport to support you when these times come. And, and it was funny because you're two young men crying on top of a washer in a derelict part of dorms in the DC college campus, right? But, that speaks to the importance and the value that I found, because after that, he and I were on a mission to develop skills and a security net outside of our sport. So we dealt with adversity, and I think we dealt with it well. So
to follow up on Blake's point, like it kind of broke us to build us up. And I think in life that happens. We just experienced it our freshman year. Some people experience it post-college, some people experience it before college. But that was a significant moment where I think Blake said what he said, and same here. Like, I'll never forget it because it really helped build a foundation in my life of being like, I can't let this get to me the way that it did. Like, I won't allow the game to, I won't be used by the game anymore. Like, that was like the last time where I felt that way. And kind of subconsciously, you just mentally get tougher and you don't. And it's just one of those things where it's like, you have to consciously be thinking about it and thinking like, am I really going to like get down on myself? Am I really going to let these emotions win? So to kind of Blake's point, that was a blessing that it happened in the way that it did. And I think in life, we all need to be humbled in certain ways. And I think God humbles us, or our sports humble us, or school humbles us, or our families humble us. And there's things that we're all going to experience throughout the course of it. So never get too high, never get too low. Kind of just stay steady and understand that every day is a blessing. Every day has its challenges, as we're all seeing in the world now, and I think we have to understand what we can control. And that's what Blake's dad really talked to us about, when we were crying and we were trying to figure out what was going on and the world was ending. It was like, what could you do? Here are your options. Hey, you're really fortunate. You're really blessed. This is what you could do.
I think that it is incredibly powerful to hear from you guys about being vulnerable and how really the power of vulnerability, how you embrace that, and how you took that as an opportunity to really learn and grow, especially as young men. I think that it is like, hats off to you guys, except for JB because he's keeping his on. So it's awesome to see and hear you guys share those types of stories. And that actually leads us into our next question. So Coach Kenny Jones says, great stories, guys. This is for JB or BJ or both. Do you feel you would have stayed at AU had you not leaned on each other to make it through college? He says, great success stories.
You can go first, JB.
Would I have stayed at AU? I don't know, to answer that question. I think it was really unique and special what Blake and I had our first few years of college. We didn't have a girlfriend. We didn't have kind of like certain cliques that we were a part of. Like, we really had each other. So maybe I would have left. We were both thinking about leaving, but I think actually we just, to Brian's point, we persevered and said, you know what, let's make this work and let's figure this out.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I can answer that and say, no, I wouldn't have left, because I think it all goes back to worst case scenario. And because I had done the prep work, so to speak, of thinking, evaluating my options in high school and saying worst case scenario, I mean, the head coaching assistant that recruited me, he and I were like this. And a week before I reported to campus as a freshman, he took the head assistant job at University of Virginia, UVA. And, I could have left right there, but I didn't pick it because of the coach. And, once, and it sounds trivial now, but as a 17, 18-year-old kid, when you come in and you're popular and you're playing and you're starting, you're on TV, your family, everybody's, throwing everything at you, and then it's gone and it's taken away overnight. You don't have anything left other than, what you're there for, and that's to be a student, right? And to contribute to the community. And for me, because I had made that decision before ever stepping foot on campus, I knew that I had to stick it out. And I knew that I was better than the people that got the opportunity in front of me. And I remember calling one of my mentors, who's my high school coach, who won a state championship together. And he said, you've got to find something outside of basketball that you can hang your hat on and that'll motivate you to get up. And he said, right now, your game is not in the game. He said, your game needs to be in the weight room. You need to go in and kick everyone's tail in the weight room. Or when you have the opportunity to be on the B team in practice, kick everyone's tail in practice, bust your tail in the classroom. And before you knew it, I was the poster child for AU, going out on all the recruiting visits with the family. And it's, look what a man of AU can be, right? But it was because I had made the decision, before I ever, again, stepped foot on campus, and that kind of made it easier for me to swallow that pill And as I worked through it, I was back in the starting rotation and then playing, 30 minutes a game, what have you, and finished out my career real strong, But if that didn't happen and I never got back in the rotation, I still would have had the academics and the internships and everything to balance out and say, hey, at the end of the day, I've got a great job and a great education.
Wow. I think it's really powerful to hear about how you guys really balanced out yourselves by, like you just described, Blake, focusing on school, focusing on the time in the weight room, focusing on all of these other things, as opposed to what's happening directly on the court, in order to help provide, in many ways balance to your life. So that helped propel you forward. And you talked about mentors and role models a little bit. We're getting ready to have Coach Kenny Jones come on and ask a question to you guys right now, as it relates to the role models and mentors who have really impacted you. I'll save the details for Coach.
Hello, guys. Thank you, Brian, for letting me come on again. Blake, Jordan, you guys, great stories. I'm sitting there listening. Again, I have basketball in my blood. I've coached basketball for many years, and now I'm a football guy, but I'm still touched by basketball. A lot of the stories that's coming on to Trey. And you guys' stories are so similar to a lot of kids that we work with. But for my own boys, I have a 17-year-old that's going through school right now. And being a guy that coaches basketball, understands basketball, and he's playing for a guy that you guys probably know the name of the coach, and I'm not going to throw his name out there right now. But the bottom line of it is he struggled with starting and then mid-season getting relegated to the bench, getting less minutes. So I'm going to have him watch this later. He's doing homework right now. He's got all pre-AP classes and trying to do that thing. But as you guys go through the tough times, Jordan, you probably can speak on this first because Blake has kind of answered who his mentor was. But my question specifically was, did you have someone to talk to? Because I already talked about leaning on each other. But did you have some advisor, someone to talk to? Because I went through that similarly when I was in college as well, where you have some tough coaches, you have tough people that's in your limelight and you want to quit, you want to leave, you want to go home, but when you go back, there's nothing there that, that you left. So who was someone that you was able to, outside of each other, lean on that helped you through the process of finishing up your education? And ultimately you already decided to stay there and finish out the process. So that would be my question right now, but I'm gonna have my son watch this because I want him to know through tough times and all these things he's going through right now, Dad can't speak for him on everything. There's some things he's going to learn for himself. So I'm going to be right there alongside of him, but this is a great message. So sorry about the long, lengthy deal, but the long story short is, who did you have to lean on when you was there to help you through the process outside of each other?
I can answer that first. I had two mentors. I think one of them was a high school coach, that I really leaned on heavily, who then became a college coach and a professional basketball coach. And he saw it at different levels. So he was able to kind of help me think about it outside of the internal, like in the moment thing that I was going through, because I think sometimes it can get really small, really narrow, and you don't really know how to understand that there's a bigger picture. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that you don't even know about. Like there are certain things I used to be told, like, oh, Jordan will play as a junior, he's going to be really good for us next year. And they would be sitting in meetings talking about that. And I remember one of the assistants told me that, and he's like, I don't know why he has this idea in his head that Jordan can't contribute right now today, because as Blake said, there was times where I played really well in practice or I got a shot in the game and I made it, and it was one of those things that gave me confidence, and I kept making shots, and I kept
points at Northwestern, baby, off the bench.
And it kept going to that, right? I kept playing really well, and that's why I kind of have to answer your question. Control the controllables, because it's less about the moment of what you're given. It's more about what you're going to do when you are given that opportunity, because the opportunity will eventually come. Regardless if there's haters or not, I think they will come. It's just a matter of being prepared mentally. But if you shut off mentally, and I think Blake we both can attest to this, you turn it off, it's really hard to get turned back on that quickly and being prepared. So it's just about being resilient. My other mentor was kind of more of an academic advisor. He helped connect Fortune 500 companies to college students. His name is Wim Taylor. Blake knows him. He looks like Obama. He's a funny guy, but he really taught me the business of basketball, sport, life, getting a job, and how to really compare the two, and really how to start to focus on what it's like to be an athlete, and how to put that mindset into training as you do in academics, or as you do in getting an internship, or as you do in trying to excel yourself as a professional, setting up your LinkedIn, setting up your resume, all the logistics, how to apply for a job, what things to say in an email, how do you follow up? I mean, there's so many little things. And that, like to my earlier point, took me really away from the game at times, which made it even stronger when it was time to come back. Because then I was like, all right, let's get back to hooping. Like the thing I love, the thing I know, the thing I care about, the thing that motivates me every day. And it took me away from some of the frustrations initially, because it was like, cool, like I can start to focus on real life things, and that's great. Obviously, I won't put all my eggs into that, just because I still wanted to enjoy what I had. But it really did give me some good perspective and opportunities that without him, I don't know if I would have had the same success long term and short term.
JB, that's a wonderful point to end on. And Coach Kenny Jones, shout out Thomas Jefferson. Appreciate you joining us, and great to see you as always, Coach. So I think one of the things that we heard there from JB at the end, and to put a period on this before we close out, in addition to finding balance in your life, finding balance from mentors, finding people who are sport-based in this case, who are professionally driven, who appeal to different facets of your personality. It's just, it's so incredible to hear how you guys have found balance through school, through sport, through your professional endeavors, and really through your life. So with that, our Q&A with Blake and Jordan has now come to a close. Guys, your stories are incredible. Thank you so much for talking with us tonight about balancing school and sport as a part of Trey Season 3. In advance of passing it back to LaJoy, 2 quick notes for the audience at home. Number 1, please stick around for just a minute, because LaJoy has a few reminders in advance of finalizing our event. And number 2, we're going to launch a quick poll right now, so please complete this poll before you leave. Finally, on behalf of every single one of our Trey athletes, coaches, and families, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Blake and Jordan. You guys are truly an inspiration. Take us home, LaJoy.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I just learned so much from hearing from your story, and you guys are amazing role models, and we thank you so much for being a part of our Fireside Chat tonight. So to our audience members, thank you for participating. We have so many amazing, great questions. Coaches, if you have athletes who were not able to attend, don't worry, because this will be live on our YouTube channel. I'll be posting some details on social media on how your athletes can watch this if they were not able to attend tonight. Don't forget to make sure that you host your debrief sessions as soon as possible, and make sure that you and your athletes are also filling out those debrief session feedback surveys. We do have more amazing events coming up for you next week, including another job shadow, which will be taking place tomorrow, actually. And then we also have a Fireside Chat that's taking place next week on mentors and community responsibilities of athletes. We are going to drop some links in the chat for you to register. So thank you, everyone, for being a part of this chat tonight. And don't forget to tag us on social media at Trey Athletes, because we definitely have another pizza party to give away. Thank you to everybody who was with us tonight, and to athletes everywhere. Good night.